Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. Sometime back, as we looked at the gospel accounts, we said it was kind of like looking at a gemstone. And whatever way you looked at it, you saw different facets of that gemstone. Well, that's especially true as we look at John's account of the Passion story. We're through with the replacement theme idea, and now John takes us with chapter 13 into the Passion story, the story of the week of Jesus' death and resurrection, and then beyond his resurrection. John's look at the Passion story is different. John spends chapter 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 in the upper room, the place where the Lord's Supper was eaten on that Thursday night. And John never mentions the Lord's Supper in that section. There is no institution of Lord's Supper in John's Gospel. That's kind of interesting. Many see it back in earlier chapter where we talked about Jesus being the bread of life, and some allusion to the Lord's Supper there. But in terms of sitting down, eating the Passover meal, this is my body, this is my blood, doesn't happen in John's Gospel. Not at all. What happens in John's Gospel in the upper room, chapter 13, the first thing that happens is that Jesus gets down on his hands and knees and he starts to wash feet. You know that story. You walked in sandals on dusty roads in Palestine and Israel, and so the idea of washing feet would not be all that unusual. In fact, a servant should have done that. Probably the folks that set up this deal in the upper room should have been washing feet. But Jesus himself gets down and does it. Peter, you gotta love him. You gotta love Peter. He just blurts things out. Jesus gets to him, gets ready to wash his feet. Peter says, "Yeah, you're not doing my feet. You're not doing my feet. I'm not worthy of you doing that." And Jesus says, "If I don't wash your feet, then you have no part in me." And Peter blurts out again, "Well then, give me a shower. Wash my whole body. Just go whole hog with this. Wash my hands, my head." And Jesus says, "He who is bathed doesn't need to wash except for his feet. He's clean all over." No Lord's Supper, but a foot washing. What does that mean? The Lord's Supper was there to equip and encourage God's people, to inspire them, to remind them of the forgiveness of sins they had, and to give them courage and strength to live out that life of service to people around them. The foot washing was designed to show the disciples what that life of service looked like. It looked a lot like washing feet. Jesus said to them in verse 14 of chapter 13, "If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you." Jesus gives them an example of what it means to be a servant. When Jesus came as king, one of the problems that the people had with his kingship was that he wasn't the right kind of king. He's the kind of king that gets down on his hands and knees and washes feet. He's not the kind of king that rides into Jerusalem on a white charger. He's not the kind of king that would kill the Romans for them. He's the kind of king that takes off the sandals of those he loves and washes their feet. The rest of that upper room time sees a couple of more of the I ams come. Chapter 14 in verse 6, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." The sixth I am. "No one comes to the Father but by me." That's pretty clear, isn't it? There aren't a lot of ways to get to heaven. There's one way to get to heaven, and that's through Jesus Christ. The seventh I am, the last one, comes in chapter 15. "I am the true vine, my Father's the vine dresser." And then he makes the analogy between him being the vine and us being the stems off that vine, and therefore the fruit bearers on that vine. Most of 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 is Jesus speaking to his disciples. Chapter 17 is Jesus praying for his disciples, first for the ones gathered there, and then also for us as well. In chapter 17, there's an interesting comment right at the beginning of Jesus' prayer. Chapter 17, verse 1, "Father, the hour has come, glorify thy Son." All through John's gospel, we've had that theme. My hour is not yet come. My hour is not yet come. Jesus' hour of glory wasn't here yet. His hour of glory hadn't come about yet. And now in chapter 17, Jesus says, my hour has come. Glorify your Son. And you find out that his hour, his finest hour, his hour of glory is going to be when he dies on a cross like a common criminal. Because he came to serve, and that was the ultimate act of service. It's the act of service that guarantees a place in heaven for you and me. His hour of glory is a bloody, gruesome death on a cross.